Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Here's what they said on cable news television shows. I'm talking about Clapper and McCabe and Samantha Power and Susan Rice.
What a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
Do you still believe the president could be a Russian asset?
I think it's possible.
President Putin's got a very high return on his investment.
He's taken a series of steps that had Vladimir Putin dictated them, he couldn't have mirrored more effectively.
Big talk. Big talk. And when behind closed doors, testifying under oath, here's what those same individuals said as recounted from the transcripts by Jesse Waters on Fox.
James Clapper, quote, never saw any direct empirical evidence. Samantha Power, I am not in possession of anything. Susan Rice, I don't recall evidence to that effect. And Andrew McCabe on the Steele dossier, we have not been able to prove the accuracy.
It's a big difference. Big difference.
Yes.
And so it's fascinating that a conversation between President Obama and alumni of the Obama administration would happen end of this week after charges were dropped against General Flynn, and of course would be conveniently leaked in quotation marks to Michael Isikoff over at Yahoo, I assume with the time codes for the clips that the President Obama wanted publicized included. Here's what Obama said to his crew regarding the essentially the exoneration of General Flynn.
The news over the last 24 hours, I think, has been somewhat downplayed about the Justice Department dropping charges against Michael Flynn. And the fact that there is no precedent that anybody can find for someone who's been charged with perjury. Just getting off scot-free. That's the kind of stuff where you begin to get worried that basic, not just institutional norms, but our basic understanding of rule of law is at risk.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, sloppy statements like that is where you think, from a former president, is where you think, well, maybe the rule of law was at risk at his hands. Flynn wasn't charged with perjury. He was charged with lying to the FBI. There is precedent for it, with his own Attorney General, Eric Holder, and the Ted Stevens case, as was pointed out by a caller earlier in our program. In addition to this, the whole thing smacks as preemptive damage control, because what's about to happen is the unmasking of whoever illegally unmasked General Flynn. That's a crime. Mm-hmm. What we also know from the transcripts from his senior officials, President Obama's that is that he was in on the conversations. He had requisite knowledge of the counterintelligence investigation that was ongoing. He was part of the skullduggery, if not directing it himself. He certainly was apprised of it.
Yeah. But he seems agitated in that phone call, doesn't he? Like they didn't win. They didn't get what they wanted.
Well, right. Also, the corruption-free administration narrative that he's trying to implant in the history book seems somewhat in jeopardy. Oh, there's also some other curious things about the rule of law, and not just from Obama's perspective, from some other perspectives. Trey Gowdy on with Hannity.
Samantha Power's explanation ought to scare the hell out of you, Sean, which is she said, I didn't make those unmasking requests. Somebody on my team may have made them, but I didn't make them. I mean, keep in mind, somebody unmasked Michael Flynn's name. Somebody unmasked his name and then gave that to President Obama. It wasn't Sally Yates. She didn't know anything about it. So I'd love for the D.C. media, who loves leaks, they live on leaks, I wish somebody would leak to them who it was that told President Obama that Michael Flynn's name was in that transcript.
Well, hopefully the Durham investigation will unearth that. I don't know why Congress couldn't. It seems like this was a question that has been bedeviling us for more than 3 years, that the collective heft of the House Intelligence and Senate Intelligence Committees could get to that answer, but they haven't. Something else we don't have, Devin Nunes reminded us during his appearance on Maria Bartiromo.
Well, the 302 is still missing, Maria. So here's what we know. This report, when it was taken down, after that report was transcribed, we had people at the highest level, the FBI, come and brief us. Plus, we have other sources that also gave us the same information, that the FBI agents essentially said, look, there's nothing to see here. Flynn wasn't lying. And that's what we were told on the record. So we knew this at the beginning of 2017. So you can imagine my astonishment when it began to leak out in the press that General Flynn was being busted for lying to the FBI, and that's what the Mueller team, the dirty Mueller team, that's what they were going to bust him on. And I told people at the highest levels of the FBI and the DOJ, I said, what are you doing here? Like, we have on the record from the highest level people that he didn't lie to the FBI. So, I don't care if that's what you're using, if you're going to drop the charges on Flynn's son or whatever conspiracy theory they were peddling against General Flynn, they had no possible way to bust him or indict him for lying to the FBI, because then that means that the FBI had lied to us. Okay, now, so what happened? What happened is that report was doctored, Maria, and that report, we know it was doctored because the Lovebirds, we have the text messages of them doctoring the report. But here's the problem.
That's right.
The original report that was used to brief the United States Congress, that report is missing. It's gone. Poof. It's out. We can't find it.
Unbelievable.
And I would think that's something that we should have, and that's something that General Flynn should have.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of Wiki at War, as well as Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. And I got to thank you guys. I've really come to depend on you guys to know when it's Monday.
Yes, there you go. Set your clock by us. There you go. So how about that? Yeah, it's a sort of a complicated situation, as Devin Nunes points out. So in order to say that General Flynn was lying, you have to also concede that the FBI was lying to Congress. So I guess the entire FBI should be charged with perjuring themselves before Congress, lying under oath.
Yeah. Well, I think, to me, the bigger story here is the one you talked initially, is that you had innumerable Obama officials, John Brennan, everybody else, publicly talking as if it was a fact that the president, that Donald Trump was an agent of Russia and had been colluding with Russia, when privately they knew for a fact that there was no actual evidence to support that. So essentially, they have been lying to the American people while they were in office and after they left office. And I'm not the conspiracy theory guy. I'm very, very skeptical of these things. But you have to ask is, with all this just incredible political opportunism on the part of a whole bunch of people just coincidentally all at the same time, or was there actually an orchestrated conspiracy to go after this administration? And somebody was in charge of that. I think that is now a legitimate question.
Well, sure.
Who do you think unmasked General Flynn, though? Was it Susan Rice?
It wasn't me.
Yeah, all right. Jim exonerating Carafano. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, but see, that's why these questions become super interesting, because once you understand who did these activities, then you have to ask the question about, okay, what was their motivation? Who directed them to do that? Or did they do that in conjunction with anyone else? Or did they think, oh, this will be fun, let's just do this? Because that's when you really start to ask questions like, what did people know, like the president and vice president, when did they know it, and what instructions did they give to their subordinates?
Well, we're starting to get some idea of when they knew it. This January 4th to the 6th of 2017 seemed to be important days, particularly this meeting in the Oval Office on January 5th, where all were present and accounted for, even though perhaps not all were operating with the same knowledge. Like Sally Yates was unaware about the Flynn Russian ambassador conversation that was being used to advance a reopening of the case at the precise time it was about to be closed. But Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Rice, Biden, Obama, Yates, all at the same meeting on January 5th talking about this issue.
And then if it is an organized conspiracy, is it just dirty tricks? or is there an actual crime there? So I thought it was really interesting when you played all those tapes and other people played innumerable examples of people saying wild and crazy things in public, but then when they were under oath, they didn't say any of those things.
Well, they had to tell the truth.
They're smart enough to know, right? They're not going to commit perjury.
Right. Right.
But again, it makes you ask the question is, was there an actual criminal conspiracy there, or is it just, was there a political conspiracy?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think, I think it's, you're right. You have to find the statutory application here in order to charge, but, and perhaps Durham and ultimately Barr will be doing just that. But it's hard to say that this is just political dirty tricks. It's hard to conceptualize the idea that senior leader at FBI, CIA, DNI, State Department are all working together to take down an administration, to target Flynn for the purposes of going up the food chain prior to that administration taking office, and without basis, as they admit under oath, going on this fishing expedition, and to suggest that using all of those state assets against an incumbent president is just dirty tricks.
And if you go back, that small core cadre of people who essentially were with Obama since the first days of the campaign, who stayed with him through his entire 8 years,
and who essentially,
right, and who essentially, that's right, isn't that interesting, comprise his inner circle. So now we're going to believe that they all ran around and did things, and the president had no knowledge of that. He didn't orchestrate that. He didn't approve that. That everything was approved by the president, except this. This people just kind of went off and, kind of did their own thing. That's beginning to strain credulity. And it does sound like, to your point, I thought you covered that really well. It did sound like that phone call was really designed to distract and cover up. Because the president, any other president of the United States, if they were sincere, they would be apologizing, saying, "Oh my God, these are terrible things that happened under my watch. They were unforgivable." Right? He'd be taking responsibility for them, or at least saying, "I didn't have anything to do with that." Instead, what do? They're doubling down on the same narrative, even though that narrative is completely unsustainable.
Yeah, precisely. He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for Monday, guys.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
You've all probably heard of asbestos and know that it's dangerous. You may also know exposure to asbestos is the only known cause of mesothelioma, a deadly cancer. People who were exposed to asbestos decades ago are being diagnosed to this day with mesothelioma. That's because it can take as many as 30 or even 50 years to develop. But did you also know there is money to pay victims of asbestos exposure from years ago? An estimated $30 billion is available to help compensate victims and their families. If you or a member of your family have been diagnosed with mesothelioma,